They were the most feared warriors the world had ever seen. The Mongols burned cities to ash, shattered kingdoms, and left Europe trembling. But in 1285, something unexpected happened. In the heart of Hungary, the unstoppable horde was brought to its knees. Few people today even know this story, and those who do often miss the shocking details. How did a nation once crushed by the Mongols turn the tables so completely? And why did the second Mongol invasion of Hungary end in disaster? Just 40 years earlier, Hungary had been devastated. In 1241, the Mongols stormed across the plains, killing tens of thousands and leaving the kingdom in ruins. King Béla IV barely survived, but instead of surrendering, he rebuilt. Castles rose from the ashes, stone walls replaced wooden ones, and villages were taught to flee rather than be slaughtered. Béla even invited back the cumins, a nomadic tribe once despised by Hungarians, offering them land and even a royal marriage to bind their loyalty. But Béla didn't stop there. He forged alliances with Polish dukes and Ruthenian princes, and even pleaded with the Pope for help. Europe took the threat seriously. Papal envoys gathered intelligence on Mongol tactics, compiling handbooks on how to fight them. Hungary had become a fortress, prepared for the next storm, and yet that storm would come not from the outside, but from a betrayal within. The danger didn't begin with Mongol horsemen crossing the mountains, it began inside Hungary itself. In 1282, the cumins, those very allies Béla had once welcomed back, rose in rebellion. At Lake Horde, Hungarian forces clashed with them in a brutal fight. When the cumins were defeated, many survivors fled east, carrying their anger straight to Nogai Khan, a powerful Mongol warlord. Their message was clear: Hungary was weak, divided, and ripe for attack. Nogai and his fellow commander Talabuga didn't need a second invitation. Within just a few years, the Mongols were preparing to ride again, and when they came in 1285, Hungary would face the storm once more. Out of this chaos, names almost lost to history began to emerge. One was Master George of Sáros County, a local noble who refused to back down. With only small forces at his command, he ambushed Mongol raiding parties again and again, sending their severed heads back to the royal court as proof of victory. Even the Queen herself struck a blow. From near Buda, Queen Elizabeth's retinue launched a sudden attack that caught the Mongols completely off guard. What had once seemed like an unstoppable horde was now bleeding from dozens of small but deadly cuts. But the Hungarians had one more weapon, and it was far more dangerous than swords or arrows. Unlike before, there was no massive royal army waiting to be crushed. Instead, local lords and barons organised their own defences. Villagers evacuated ahead of the invasion. Food and livestock were hidden behind stone walls, and fortified castles stood ready. The Mongols, who once thrived on plunder and fear, found only empty settlements and silent roads. Everywhere they rode, they met resistance. Small ambushes chipped away at their forces, while hunger and exhaustion spread through the ranks. For the first time, the Mongols weren't the hunters. They were the ones being hunted, and soon, unexpected heroes would rise from the shadows to strike back. Out of this chaos, names almost lost to history began to emerge. One was Master George of Sáros County, a local noble who refused to back down. With only small forces at his command, he ambushed Mongol raiding parties again and again, sending their severed heads back to the royal court as proof of victory. Even the Queen herself struck a blow. From near Buda, Queen Elizabeth's retinue launched a sudden attack that caught the Mongols completely off guard. What had once seemed like an unstoppable horde was now bleeding from dozens of small but deadly cuts. But the Hungarians had one more weapon, and it was far more dangerous than swords or arrows. The Hungarians had learned the hard way in 1241. This time they fought with cunning. Scouts disguised themselves as Mongol riders, matching their clothes, weapons, even their bows, and slipped deep into enemy camps. They gathered intelligence tracking every movement and weakness of Talabuga's army. Armed with this knowledge, the Hungarians struck with precision. Their heavy cavalry charged exhausted Mongol troops at just the right moment, smashing through their lines. Talabuga realized the campaign was collapsing. He ordered a retreat through the Carpathian passes, but even here he found no safety. Light Hungarian forces ambushed the fleeing Mongols, tearing them apart in the mountain valleys. According to one chronicler, Talabuga returned home with nothing but his horse and his wife, a humiliating reminder of total defeat. But while Talabega limped away broken, Nogai Khan was still ravaging the land. While Talabega's army was being destroyed, Nogai pressed deeper into Transylvania. Towns like Regen, Brasov, and Bystrica were raided, but strong stone fortresses stood firm. Without proper siege engines, Nogai could do little more than burn what he could reach. His riders starved, slowed, and bled against walls they could not break. By the time King Ladislaus IV gathered his royal army, the fighting was already turning against the Mongols. Local forces under Roland Borza, joined by Saxons, Vlachs, and Sekulis, had already crushed Nogai's troops in open battle. All the king had to do was chase down the scattered survivors. For the first time in living memory, the Mongols had been beaten not once, but twice, in the very heart of Europe. By the spring of 1286, the second Mongol invasion of Hungary was over. Talabega had limped home humiliated, his army shattered in the Carpathians. Nogai had failed to take a single fortress, his forces cut to pieces by local resistance. The horde that once seemed unstoppable had been turned back by a kingdom that had learned, adapted, and refused to fall twice to the same disaster. Hungary had become the graveyard of Mongol ambition in Central Europe, and yet the Mongols were not finished. Their gaze shifted north, toward Poland. What happened there would be just as shocking, and that's the story we'll uncover in the next episode.